Hey, welcome to the show. I'm Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst, and this is a mock offseason on the Memphis Grizzlies where I'm going to show how they could complete some hypothetical moves within the cap rules, mostly for fun, but also for educational purposes. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, my name, Yossi Goslin. Now is the best time of year to do that. I'm going to be reacting to all sorts of transactions as they happen. Subscribe to Third Apron, my newsletter. We get deeper salary cap analysis, and make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Apple, Spotify at my name, Yossi Goslin, to see all my previous content. I've already covered the Grizzlies pretty thoroughly on Third Apron. You can read more about some of the salary cap stuff they're going to encounter this offseason. And I already did a podcast discussing them with the Michael Cole. I put the links in the description for both of those. So check this out if you want a little more context of what I'm about to talk about. But in this video, I'm going to do four things. I'm going to renegotiate and extend the contract of Jaren Jackson Jr. I'm going to re-sign Santi Aldama. I'm going to trade for a wing, which is going to be Cameron Johnson, someone they've been linked to in the past. And I'm going to sign a big man with their mid-level exception. Let's get to it. So the days are over where the Grizzlies are considered this young up-and-coming team. They've gone through a lot of diversity since they won their one playoff series in 2022, including two pretty disappointing playoff exits and a injury-filled season in 2024. They bounced back from that pretty strong to begin the past season. Then they kind of tailed off towards the end. And I've seen many people look at the result and start to rule them out and even think that maybe they should blow it up. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I don't think they're going to be trading any of their top guys unless they specifically ask out. So the Grizzlies are going to spend the offseason mostly focusing on running it back, and even that is going to have its own set of challenges, mainly Jaren Jackson Jr. He is entering the final year of the 4-year, $105 million extension he signed a couple years ago. The contract was structured where it started in the high $20 million range and it descended all the way down to $23.4 million. So great deal in the short term, but a little problematic now because they can't extend it normally. The normal extension that he can do goes up to a maximum of 4 years, $147 million. That's not going to cut it for him. That means the Grizzlies have three options to bring him back long term. One is getting the Supermax, which would allow him to re-sign or extend for up to 35% of the salary cap. Unfortunately, we just got the news earlier last week that he did not make an All-NBA team, meaning he did not qualify for the Supermax. He could still qualify next year if he makes All-NBA, and if he does, then he could sign it as a free agent, which is number two. He can enter free agency, get up to 30% of the salary cap with the Grizzlies or any team. I think he should be getting max level offers if he hits the open market, but free agency brings its own set of risks. And at the same time, the Grizzlies probably don't even want him to hit the open market. So that leads to number three, renegotiation and extension. And that is when a team uses cap space to increase a player's current salary and then extend off that higher amount to a bigger possible extension. Jaren will qualify for this because he is entering the third anniversary of a 4-year deal. And as long as you do that and it's a deal spanning at least 4 seasons, you can eventually renegotiate your contract. This is why the Grizzlies traded a first-round pick to get off Marcus Smart. This helped create the cap space as a hedge in case Jackson Jr. didn't make an All-NBA team. His candidacy was really on the fringes. It seemed like for most of the season he was going to qualify, but just good foresight to prepare for this just in case. So when you look at the roster, they have 11 players under contract, $135 million payroll, which is pretty low, and they can generate up to $17.5 million in cap space. However, they're really going to be working with this amount, $6.9 million, because that if they go up to $17.5 million, that means they renounce the free agency rights of Santi Aldama, which they're not going to do. They're going to want to keep them. So they're going to work with $6.9 million. That lets them keep this $11.88 million cap hold so they could spend this amount to increase Jaren's salary, and then they will be able to re-sign Aldama afterwards with his bird rights, and they also still have the room mid-level exception worth $8.8 million to use after. So before I get into the renegotiation possibility, I want to talk about Jaren Jackson's Supermax, what it would have been, and like a projection of what he could have gotten. I went really deep on that situation on Third Apron. Again, I highly suggest you check the link in the description. It's a free post, so everyone can see it. I got really into the details about it, how it would work, and also just kind of compared how he can how a renegotiation could work versus getting the Supermax. But if he got the Supermax, if he qualified for the Supermax, he would have been eligible to extend for up to 5 years, $345 million. He was probably not going to get that full amount, that 35% max. He was probably going to get something a little smaller. Teams don't have to give players who qualify for the Supermax the full 35%. You can give them somewhere between 30 and 35%. So the most, really like the only player who got in between those ranges is Rudy Gobert, who also won Defensive Player of the Year. And when he qualified, the Jazz gave him about 31% of the cap. So I get the feeling that if he qualified, he would have probably gotten around that amount. So here is a projection of what that could have looked like on a 5-year deal. Starts at about 52.7 million, tops out at just under 70 million. The idea is that the Grizzlies are giving him just slightly more than what he could have gotten on the open market, plus an additional year, because if he signed with another team, he would only be able to get 4 years. I know that these numbers seem really high right now, but it's all relative. It just, the cap is going to keep rising, especially right now it's set to rise 10% per year over the next few years. These numbers are going to start looking really ridiculous. But it would end at roughly 28%. That's number 69.6 million. That would be the equivalent of a player making $43 million today. And now let's take a look at a renegotiation option. So here is the maximum renegotiation he can get right now if he increases his $23.4 million salary with that $6.9 million cap space, gets him up to $30.3 million for the upcoming season. Then you could increase it up to $42.4 million. That's 140% off the first year salary. That's the maximum amount you can do in an extension. And then when you give the 8% maximum raises in between seasons, it will top out to a total of $220 million over 5 years, which is roughly starting at 25% of the cap. And then it's a total of like what, 190 something million dollars in new money. I don't think that's going to be quite enough. So I think the Grizzlies are going to need a little more cap space. And now here's another renegotiation and extension that gets them closer to that 30% max. Here, his salary is increased by $12 million off that $23.4 million amount. So how did the Grizzlies make this cap space? By trading John Conchar salary to another team, not taking anything back. Probably requires a second round pick to do it. So that increases their cap space from 6.9 million to just under 12 million. So its current salary goes up to 35.2 million. And then the 140% raise brings it up to 49 million. That's 29% of the cap. Not quite 30%, but here's the thing. So the total tops out at about 256 million over 5 years. So he essentially makes up a lot of the lost earnings within the next few years. If he made the Supermax, he'd probably still take it because then he gets that extra guaranteed year at like whatever it was, 70 million. But here is a pretty good insurance policy, basically. So the Grizzlies, they have the means to re-sign Jaren Jackson, extend him, keep him long-term. And now it's going to be basically up to him if this is what he wants to do. So I'm just going to show you really quickly how this works on the cap sheet. Here is their cap sheet after they salary dump John Conchar, and that gives them about $12 million in cap space. And then here they are after they renegotiate the first year salary of Jaren Jackson Jr.'s contract, gets it up to that $35.2 million. And they are left with about $46 million in tax space. That's a lot of money to spend, but not too many means to do it. The biggest one is going to be re-signing Santi Aldama. Remember, they have his bird rights, so let's negotiate a contract for him. So last week, I did my Sixers mock-off season, and in it, I came up with a projection of what I think Quentin Grimes' contract situation, how that might play out. Gave it roughly 5 years, $90 million, which is slightly above the $14.1 million mid-level exception that most teams can offer him. I get the feeling that restricted free agency and the lack of cap space teams might limit a guy like him to getting slightly above the mid-level exception. So it's just kind of how I see it playing out. And I think the same could apply to Santi Aldama, slightly above the mid-level to return to Memphis. However, now that the Grizzlies will have used up their cap space, that don't have many means to increase their payroll, they can only do so much in a trade, and the room mid-level exception then only adds an additional $9 million. So they might as well take advantage of this flexibility with Aldama's next contract and front load it. So here is a same thing, 5 year, $90 million deal, but it's descending. So it starts all the way up at 21.4 million, which seems like a lot for Aldama right now, which is 14% of the cap. But then he gets the full 8%, the maximum 8% decreases he could get in subsequent seasons, which gets it all the way down to 14.6 million, which is just 6% of the salary cap 5 years from now. So if the Grizzlies do renegotiate Jaren's contract, they're going to have a lot of flexibility after, not a lot of ways to spend the money. So I would expect them to use a good portion of their flexibility to get Aldama's salary as high as possible so it could descend in future seasons and help with the cost of Jaren's next contract and whatever raises their other top guys are going to be making over the next few years. Now I just want to take a quick look at the Grizzlies draft situation over the next 8 drafts. So they don't have their pick in the 2025 draft, but they have all their other first round picks in the subsequent seasons. So they can trade up to a maximum of 4. Their maximal package could be just trading the even numbered picks. But I do want to make a note that they have a couple pretty interesting ones, particularly 2026 and 2030. In 2026, they have swapping rights. They get the least favorable swap between Phoenix and Orlando. And then there's also something like that coming into play in 2030. If you want to remember how the Grizzlies got swapping rights from the Suns, it was some like very menial salary dump. Like they gave the Suns, I think, 3 second-round picks, but then also took on the minimum salary of Isaiah Todd to save them just a little bit of money. So already looking pretty good for the Grizzlies. But here's how it works, it's particularly for 2026, because I'm going to end up trading that pick. So let's say let's look at the standings from this season as an example. The Suns finished like with the 9th or 10th worst record. Orlando finished with like what would be the 17th overall pick, I think. And the Grizzlies were like 18th. So if the same standings play out again like this year, then the Magic would swap with the Suns. The Magic would get into the top 10. The Suns would then drop to like 17th, and then the Grizzlies could swap with the Suns after that. So if the Grizzlies end up being much better and are in the 20s, then that pick can be in the middle of the first round. And all that variability could make their first round pick next year a pretty valuable one, or at least a pretty intriguing one for interested teams. And now I'm going to trade for Cameron Johnson, who is a player the Grizzlies have been linked to ahead of last year's trade deadline. I think the Grizzlies are still going to need a veteran wing to help their starting and closing lineup. They almost traded for Dorian Finney-Smith ahead of last year's trade deadline. On the podcast, I pinpointed Herb Jones as the type of guy I think would be a great fit for the Grizzlies, and I could see them pursuing. But here I'm going to do Cam Johnson. I think it's just a little bit more fun. So what would be required from Memphis? So salary-wise, since they're going to be below the first apron, they can use the expanded trade exceptions, so they could send out less salary to take in Cameron Johnson's bigger salary and increase the payroll in the trade. So how much less? So Cam, since he makes between $8.3 million and $33 million, the Grizzlies just need to get within $8.5 million of his salary. So that means they just need to send out $13 million. So Brandon Clark is now the Grizzlies' lone mid-level sized salary. However, his $12.5 million falls just short of Cam Johnson's $21.6 million salary. So they just got to throw in another minimum player, which I think they're going to have to anyways. So I have them sending JJ Jackson, still pretty intriguing, still one of the youngest players in the league, who could fit the Nets rebuild over the next few years. And then I have them sending that 2026 first round pick that I mentioned about how there's like the swaps with the Magic and the Suns going on, but I made it a little bit protected on the Grizzlies end, just top 8 protected just in case this, both the Magic and the Suns are terrible. So then at least the Grizzlies can have some protection on that. So the Nets end up getting what would most likely be a pretty solid pick, probably end up being like in the middle of the first round. Maybe the Nets will require a little bit more, like another future first round pick. But I think for the most part, the Grizzlies are like pretty close to what might be enough to get a deal done here. And now here is the final roster I put together. I've got Jaren Jackson Jr. and Santi Aldama on their new salaries. I've got Cam Johnson in for Brandon Clark and JJ Jackson. And I had them add a big man with their room mid-level exception. I think they're going to need one after trading Clark. And I put Day'Ron Sharpe because I think he'd be a good fit there. And another guy that the Grizzlies have been linked to in the past, another former net. And he is restricted, though. Obviously, they could go after an unrestricted guy like Al Horford, Brook Lopez, Clint Capella, someone like that. So this might require the Nets' cooperation in a sign and trade. The room mid-level could be used as a trade exception now, so they could sign and trade him into that exception, give him up to a 3-year deal. I guess it will take several seconds, maybe like a first-round pick swap to get the Nets interested. So then I got them going to the 14-player minimum by signing couple of veteran minimum signings. They have the 48th pick in the draft, so I had them signing that player to a standard contract, and that leaves them about $3.5 million below the luxury tax. Didn't mention earlier, but I would imagine the Grizzlies are going to stay below the luxury tax this season. There are a couple incentives, unlikely incentives that could hit for Johnson and Bane, but they're pretty unlikely to hit. But they have just a little bit of flexibility to stay below the tax if some of them do hit. And then they could also just do a 15 signing as well. And if you're wondering if this build is sustainable at least for the next season, the answer is yes. Here is Jackson with his big raise in the following season. I've got Aldama's salary declining slightly. Cameron Johnson's there. Day'Ron Sharpe's next year's salary's there. And they are just about $4.9 million over the projected tax next season. So they are in a pretty good spot to run this back. And that is the mock off season. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I really enjoyed doing this one. Do you guys think that this is enough value to get a guy like Cam Johnson? And if not him, are there any other forwards that you would like to see the Grizzlies pursue this off season? Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Follow me on all the platforms that I've got shown on the overlays, and check the link in the description about Sports Business Classroom. I'm going to be instructor there for the salary cap program, and I've got a sign-up code there. Whoever signs up with it can get lifetime access to the Third Apron newsletter.